Max Waffa could feel the weight of Todd's words pressing down on him like an anvil. "We're unable to verify the transaction," he had said, a statement laced with implications that cut deeper than any sharp word could. The sudden shift in the room's atmosphere, the cautious way the customers glanced his way, Max knew this wasn't just policy. This was something else entirely, a subtle reminder that assumptions could overshadow the stark reality of his accomplishments. His heart raced, not out of fear, but from the righteous anger bubbling just beneath the surface. A montage of memories paraded through his mind, years of late nights building Waffa Trust, the milestones of growth, the employees he had trained, the clients who had trusted him with their dreams and savings. And here he was, treated like a stranger in the very institution he had created. "Let me introduce myself properly," he said, leaning closer, lowering his voice to cut through the suddenly thick atmosphere of the bank. The moment he revealed his identity, CEO of Waffa Trust, the tension hung suspended, charged, electrifying. He could see Todd's facade crack, the unsettling realization dawning on him that he had underestimated Max utterly. The weight of silence settled in as Max pulled his ID from Todd's grip. Their eyes locked in a standoff, and he could feel the 100 unspoken things swirling around him in that instant. Yet even in Todd's disbelief, he could tell the manager was backpedaling in his mind, scrambling to find a way out of this self-made trap. But it was too late, there was no escape now. "I built this bank," Max stated, letting the words hang heavily in the air. The way Todd's shoulders slumped told him all he needed to know. No more bravado, no more rehearsed lines. In that moment, Max was not just a disappointed customer, he was a force with which to be reckoned. As he turned to leave, the silence resumed its grip around the lobby. Customers snuck glances, intrigued by the unfolding drama. He spotted an older woman in a floral dress whispering to a companion and a man in business attire staring wide-eyed at the exchange, his expression a mix of trepidation and curiosity. They saw what Todd couldn't, a towering figure with the power to demand change. Max stepped toward the exit, but before he could reach the door, Todd's voice trailed after him, desperate and wavering. "Mr. Waffa, I apologize. This was just a misunderstanding." Max stopped in his tracks. "A misunderstanding," he echoed, amusement dancing in his tone. "A misunderstanding would imply there was an error made in processing my request." He turned on his heel, facing Todd with an intensity that demanded acknowledgement. "What you did was deny me access to my own money based simply on who you thought I was, not who I really am." Todd shifted uncomfortably, grasping for words that seemed to escape him. Time hung still as he swallowed hard, the veneer of calm that had marked their earlier conversation disintegrating. "I assure you this was not intended." "Intention doesn't matter when assumptions dictate your actions," Max interrupted sternly, his voice like ice, cutting through the rising tension. "You treated me differently, and that's the issue. Not just for me, but for everyone who walks through those doors." "The security protocols," Todd started to say, but Max was ready. "Don't hide behind protocols, Todd," he snapped. "You know the truth. You wouldn't question a man who looked the part." His voice dropped slightly, leaning closer once more. "This isn't going to end here. Today I walked in as just another customer, but it turns out that's the only disguise I needed to expose the truth." And just like that, the vision he had been nursing since his self-funded venture began to crystallize. It wasn't enough to build a legacy, he had to ensure that legacy represented fairness and inclusion. Every whispered concern he had brushed off, every comment that had made him pause, now shouted at him, demanding his attention. He was the change maker, and it was time others learned that lesson too. With resolve sharpened like glass, he whipped his phone from his bag and hit record. The moment he aimed the lens at Todd, he felt a rush of power. "I want everyone to see how you treat a customer when you think is undeserving. I want to capture this moment when the truth comes to light." As he recorded, the customers around him began to shift uneasily, the reality of standing witness to a wrongdoing dawning on them. Todd's mask finally crumbled, panic flashing in his gaze as he reached out as if to snatch Max's phone away. "Stop," he barked. But Max didn't waver. A broader audience was tuning in, whether they liked it or not. "You don't get to intimidate me, Todd," he said, his voice steady. "You can pretend I'm just a nobody, but I'm going to make sure you're never able to dismiss anyone like this again." Todd's desperation morphed, and in that moment, Max understood the impact of his bold confrontation. This was not only a stand for himself, it was for every customer who had felt the sting of discrimination, every individual who had quietly accepted being ignored simply because they didn't fit a mold. Time had come for change, and it began now, laying the very groundwork of the bank he had envisioned. Each individual mattered, including Todd. "Let's revisit that meeting with corporate," he said, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You're going to need some guidance on how to treat people equally. Don't worry, I'll be there to ensure you understand." With that, he turned to take his leave, but not before catching one last fleeting glimpse of the bank lobby, feeling buoyed by the possibilities ahead. He knew he had awakened something at that Wafa Trust branch, sparking the beginning of a collective voice that would no longer remain silent. His determination thickened like fortified steel as he stepped out into the world, knowing that this battle had only just begun. There were more fights to win, more walls to break down, but in that bank filled with uncertainty, a message had been sent: he would not be the last voice for change. And Max Wafa, now more than ever, was ready to lead the charge. Max Wafa stepped out of Wafa Trust and into the sunlight, the weight of the confrontation still reverberating within him. The echoes of Todd's panic-stricken face lingered in his mind, a potent reminder of the assumptions that govern behavior in the high-stakes world of banking. He had expected some pushback when he began building a legacy based on fairness and accessibility, but what happened today was a stark revelation, the depth of the biases he had only begun to address. As he walked to his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, he knew he had a mission ahead. He could feel the tide of change beginning to shift within him. This wasn't just about one interaction gone wrong, it was about transforming the culture of an institution he had created, ensuring that no one else would have to face the humiliation he endured that afternoon. After a quick drive back to the corporate office, Max opened the door to the conference room and was met with the concerned faces of his executive team. They had gathered to discuss what had transpired and how they would address the fallout. Max could sense the tension in the room, everyone could feel that this was not just another meeting. This was the moment they would collectively decide the future of Wafa Trust. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice steady but urgent. "Today, I experience firsthand how deeply ingrained biases can affect our customers and, consequently, our business. I walked into our branch wanting to make a simple withdrawal, and because of who I am, or rather, who I appeared to be, I faced skepticism and discrimination." The silence that followed felt heavy, yet it was charged with anticipation. The executives exchanged glances, the weight of Max's words palpable in the air. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, grappling with the implications of what he was saying. "Today was about more than just a transaction," he continued, emphasizing the collective repercussions. "It revealed a flaw in our culture. We've talked about building an inclusive environment, but clearly, we're not living it in our branches. We've got to confront this and make significant changes, starting now." Sarah, the head of human resources, leaned in slightly, her brow furrowed with concern. "This isn't going to be easy. Maximum implementing change at this level requires total buy-in from every branch manager, and not everyone will see it the way we do. There will be resistance." Max nodded, acknowledging the reality of the uphill battle they faced. "I'm aware of that, and I expect it. This can't be a brush-off or a PR campaign. We need genuine accountability, and we need to teach everyone what it means to treat all customers with respect, regardless of their appearance or background." "Are you suggesting mandatory training?" asked James, the chief operations officer, crossing his arms skeptically. "It might create friction among employees who believe they're already doing their jobs correctly." "I am suggesting that we launch comprehensive bias training across all branches. We need to start with the basics, educating our staff about systemic bias and why it matters. If they can't understand the problem, they won't be able to change. Additionally, we'll institute a robust reporting system for customers to voice their grievances, anonymous if they choose to remain so." There were murmurings around the table, and Max could sense reluctance to embrace such sweeping changes. But he pressed on, driven by a newfound urgency. "This isn't just about following regulations or ticking boxes. It's about cultivating a culture where everyone, regardless of their background, feels safe and respected at Wafa Trust." Max's passion was evident, and slowly but surely, he could see the sparks of agreement among his team. "We can't wait for another incident to occur, to react. We need to act decisively. I want actionable changes ready for discussion in our next meeting. This isn't just about Wafa Trust, it's about leading the industry by example." As he laid out his vision, a sense of hope began to fill the room. He was determined to transform what had been a painful experience into a catalyst for positive change. He could feel his executive team starting to gravitate toward his vision. It was time to redefine their mission at Wafa Trust, to become the gold standard in equitable banking. After the meeting concluded, Max felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration as he left the conference room. He paused just outside the door, watching his team break into discussions about how to move forward. Although he anticipated resistance, today he had ignited a spark, a flame that he hoped would spread broadly. Still buzzing with energy, Max returned to his office, sitting at his desk with the sun streaming through the windows. He picked up his phone, deliberating on his next steps. It was time to reach out to several advisors and advocates in the industry who had done similar work in creating inclusive environments. If Wafa Trust was going to lead by example, it needed expert guidance on best practices and strategies that had proven successful elsewhere. Tapping his fingers anxiously on the desk, Max composed an email detailing his vision and intentions, reaching out to experts while outlining a meeting agenda that highlighted collaboration towards change. He sent it off and leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply. The email was just the first step, but it was a necessary one. As the afternoon slipped away, his phone buzzed with alerts, responses from the network he'd reached out to, each filled with enthusiastic support and a willingness to participate. This only fueled his conviction. Suddenly, a thought pierced through his excitement, the possibility that today had been just a prelude. There would be pushback, no doubt. But that was the reality of change, it was rarely met with open arms. Now that he had taken the first step, it was crucial to build momentum. His phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. This time, it was a call from Sarah, her tone urgent. "Max, can you come down to the branch? It's important." "On my way," he replied, curious about what was unfolding. As he made his way down, he felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Was there yet another issue at the branch, or was it something connected to the aftermath of today's encounter? Upon reaching the branch, Max was greeted by Sarah and a few other employees gathered in a small huddle. Their faces wore expressions that mirrored both concern and determination. "What's going on?" he asked, squinting at the group. "After you left this morning," Sarah began, "customers have started speaking up. They're upset about what happened. The incident you experienced has reverberated throughout the community." Max's heart raced as he realized the implications of their reactions. "What do you mean?" he pressed. "A few individuals even came forward to share their own experiences," Sarah replied. "They're demanding change. They don't want this to go unnoticed." Max felt a rush of emotions wash over him, both hope and concern. It was proof that the ripples created by his confrontation with Todd were beginning to turn into waves. People were willing to raise their voices. This was a pivotal moment, one that could either reinforce the culture of silence or push Wafa Trust to finally become a beacon of integrity in the banking world. "Let's facilitate that," Max urged, his voice steady. "We need to listen to their stories and understand how we can implement real change. If they are willing to speak up, we need to provide them the platform." As the meeting shifted into a brainstorming session, Max felt a renewed determination resonate within him. Wafa Trust had the potential to foster an open dialogue, an environment of transparency where people could share their experiences without the fear of being dismissed. "Let's gather these stories and make sure they are heard," he said to the group. "We need to create a forum where people feel safe to express their thoughts and something tangible can come from their input." With every moment passing, Max could feel the foundations of change solidifying, a powerful current building within Wafa Trust. And amidst the challenges ahead, he was ready to rise to meet them, fully aware that he had the support of his team as they embarked on this transformative journey together. He turned his gaze to the front of the branch, envisioning the faces of the customers they would engage in the coming days. Max knew that this was the path forward, one paved with authenticity and the promise of a better future for Wafa Trust. He was prepared to lead, armed with determination, and ready to reclaim the narrative about what banking should truly represent. With a sense of purpose igniting his every step, Max Wafa stood in front of the bustling branch, the hum of activity flowing around him like a current. Sarah and the others were still gathered at a huddle, exchanging thoughts and ideas, their energy contagious. He could see a spark within them, too, an understanding that their collective effort could initiate real change. This was just the beginning, a fresh chapter for Wafa Trust. As the conversations thrummed with energy, Max took a moment to compose himself and think about how to structure this newfound initiative. They would need guidelines for creating the forum, a framework that encouraged authentic sharing and meaningful discussion without devolving into chaos. He imagined a space filled with empathy, where both customers and employees could come together to express their concerns, tell their stories, and propose solutions. "Let's schedule an open community meeting," he declared, addressing everyone in the huddle. "I want to invite our customers to share their experiences. We can hold it here at the branch, maybe next week. We'll keep it informal but sincere. Let's call it Wafa Voices. The name fits, Sarah chimed in, a smile breaking through her earlier apprehension. But we have to promote it effectively to ensure a good turnout. I'll reach out to our marketing team for help. Social media campaigns, flyers, everything we can think of. Max nodded, his excitement palpable. And let's create a sign-up sheet for customers who might want to share their stories vocally. For those who don't feel comfortable speaking, we can set up a way for them to submit their experiences anonymously. We'll gather those, too. As they fleshed out the details, the atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to enthusiasm. Max had a vision, and he could feel it resonating within his team, spurring them onward. In that moment, he grasped that it wasn't just about responding to the negative experience he faced, it was about fostering a culture rooted in honesty and inclusivity. They were really on the verge of something special. After the initial planning, a sense of urgency propelled Max to reach out to various stakeholders. He sent emails to community leaders, local activism groups, and customer advocacy platforms, inviting them to the meeting and encouraging them to bring their voices. The more participants they had, the stronger the collective impact they would make. In the days following their brainstorm meeting, Max watched as excitement about Wafa Voices spread like wildfire. Flyers decorated the walls of the branch, colorful and inviting, and social media posts drew attention from customers near and far. Every day, he felt the heartbeat of the community swelling around him, a palpable anticipation for what was to come. He could see Wafa Trust not just surviving but thriving in a way that honored its core values. As the date approached, Max felt the nerves tingling in the pit of his stomach. Was he ready for this? Would the community feel safe enough to share their stories in the space they had created? He had envisioned a platform where emotions could run high, where the blend of heartfelt anecdotes and angry grievances would coexist. But he knew he couldn't do this alone. His team had to be there, standing beside him as a united front. The day of Wafa Voices finally arrived, and the branch buzzed with an energy he had never encountered before. Chairs filled the viewing area, and a small stage at the front was adorned with potted plants and gentle lighting to create a warm environment that invited intimacy. Max stood backstage for a moment, looking out into the sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces blending together, a colorful mosaic of the community he served. He felt a rush of both excitement and trepidation, but he quickly steadied himself. He wanted this to be an honest discussion, a dialogue that acknowledged the past and paved the way for a better future. As he walked on stage, the room fell quiet, and all eyes turned to him. He took a deep breath, letting the stillness wash over him before speaking. Thank you all for being here today. Your presence shows a commitment to making Wafa Trust a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. Today isn't just about discussing problems, we're here to empower one another through our stories. A ripple of murmurs spread and then settled, much like the waves of an ocean. He could sense the group's anticipation, their eagerness for what was to come. I want to start by sharing my own experience. Just a few days ago, I had an interaction at one of our branches that reminded me of a problem we must address head-on: bias and discrimination. Today, we aren't just gathering to listen, we're here to give each other the strength to demand change together. Max spoke candidly about the challenges he faced, the emotions that swelled within him during that fateful encounter. As he narrated his story, he observed the way people's expressions shifted. Some nodded in understanding, while others furrowed their brows, recalling their experiences in parallel with his. When he wrapped up with an invitation for others to join him on stage, a tangible energy surged through the crowd, an invitation to share not just their grievances but also their hopes. One by one, faces brightened as individuals stood to speak, and the room became alive with storytelling. There was Ava, who recounted how she felt ignored in the bank due to her age despite having built a successful small business. Then came Marcus, whose voice shook with emotion as he described a transaction mishap that left him feeling devalued. Each story wove a thread into the fabric of the meeting, revealing a tapestry of shared pain and mutual aspirations. Max felt each word reverberate in his heart, a sucker punch of reality followed by a wave of empathy that swept across the room. People spoke of their experiences near and far, sharing hurt, anger, hope, and dreams. They were not just sharing their stories with him, they were sharing them with one another, forming connections that spread warmth amidst vulnerability. As the gathering continued, Max noticed the physical distance between chairs shrinking. Attendees began to form small clusters by themselves, engaging in lively discussions following each story. Laughter mixed with tears, and the space transformed into a living, breathing commentary on their collective journey. By the end of the event, Max stood at the center of an electrifying atmosphere. People were exchanging contact information, forming alliances, and brainstorming ways to channel their voices into constructive initiatives. It was a beautiful chaos, a kaleidoscope of empowerment and belonging. When the final speaker wrapped up his thoughts, the applause that erupted felt more than just appreciation, it was a declaration of unity. In that moment, Max felt a swell of pride for everyone who had gathered. He saw them not just as customers or employees, but as allies. Together, they could redefine what it meant to belong to Wafa Trust. As the gathering dispersed, Max remained in the branch, letting the energy settle around him. He looked over the sign-up sheets and scribbled stories and recognized that today was only the beginning. Together, they had planted a seed that could grow into an enduring legacy. Wafa Trust would evolve, led by voices that demanded change, and within him, the determination surged. The fight for inclusivity and equity would continue. With newfound courage, he vowed to keep walking this path, ensuring their voices would echo long after the last chair had been put away, transforming Wafa Trust into a place not just for customers, but for a community that stands together. The next chapter had begun, and Max was ready to lead. As the echoes of applause faded into the background, Max remained rooted in the center of the branch, the vibrant energy surrounding him a stark contrast to the weight that had burdened the institution just days prior. He looked around, witnessing the remnants of connections forged in just hours, a tapestry of stories interwoven with shared experiences and aspirations. The room was alive, buzzing with conversations and a palpable sense of commitment to transformation. With each story recounted that day, he saw a flicker of hope ignite in the eyes of the customers, those whom his branch had failed and those who had long felt unseen. This was an awakening, a realization that they could reclaim their power to enact change within the walls of this institution. Yet beneath the excitement lay an underlying urgency. The work had just begun. Today's gathering had opened a door, but it was imperative that they sustain the momentum generated within those walls. How could they ensure that this wasn't just a one-time event, a fleeting moment lost in the tide of time? Sarah, let's gather everyone. We need to discuss how to convert this energy into actionable plans, Max said, his voice cutting through the chatter. As the team formed a circle, Max felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He began, today was remarkable. But we need to solidify these connections into a long-term commitment. We can't just listen and walk away. We have to create tangible follow-ups. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. I agree. If we don't act quickly, we risk losing the trust people placed in us today. We need to establish a committee, customers and employees alike, a diversity and belonging task force dedicated to addressing the concerns raised and nurturing this enthusiasm. That's brilliant, interjected James, as excitement sparked in his eyes. We can add regular community forums to our annual schedule, ensuring that everyone feels like they have an ongoing connection with Wafa Trust. Let's also implement a feedback system, Sarah contributed. We can create a digital portal where customers can voice their experiences anytime. It will help us stay informed and responsive. Max smiled, feeling a shift in the atmosphere. Ideas flowed from his team like a river, each suggestion building upon the last. They were no longer just piecing together potential solutions, they were collectively investing in a vision that not only represented Wafa Trust but also empowered the voices of their community. With the groundwork firming up under them, Max took a moment to reflect on the path that lay ahead. They would need to commit personnel and resources to the task force, dedicate hours to training, and engage in difficult conversations both internally and externally. But he could sense the pulse of change already thrumming through their veins. In the weeks that followed, Wafa Trust became a hub for dialogue, a place where stories were not just heard, but honored. The task force convened regularly, made up of dedicated employees and enthusiastic community members who had stepped up to lead the charge for change. They assessed the feedback received, strategized initiatives focused on inclusivity, and planned outreach events designed to deepen their connections. Wafa Voices evolved into a regular series, welcoming not only past attendees but also bringing in new customers, allowing their stories to flourish freely. With each session, the branch transformed into a refuge, a space where the diversity of thought and experience was celebrated. The beauty of vulnerability enveloped the room as individuals became emboldened, sharing their truths and working through stories that had long sat unaddressed. Max marveled at the commitment of his colleagues, observing how their roles morphed with sincerity. They were not just facilitators but advocates for the community they served. Teams arranged workshops, cultural events, and collaborations with local organizations, forging partnerships that echoed throughout the community. Gradually, The narratives of the past transformed into a hopeful future scripted by those willing to stand together and demand accountability. But with the gains came challenges. Resistance festered among a few employees who clung stubbornly to traditions and perceived notions. Max hadn't anticipated how the push for inclusivity would ruffle feathers among those who did not understand the need for change. Confronting dissent required delicate handling, engaging discussions, and frequent reassessments to prevent fragmentation. One afternoon, during a tense meeting, he felt a wave of frustration wash over him as he attempted to address the concerns of skeptical managers. This isn't about an attack on tradition. It's about evolving. Embracing the diversity of thought and experience will only enhance the foundation our bank was built on. The conversation escalated, voices clashing over differing perspectives. Some rallied around the call for change, while others raised apprehensions about the impact on their working culture. But amid the rising tension, a breakthrough moment emerged. A younger employee, who had quietly listened, stood and said, "I just want to say that I don't feel like I've had a voice. And today, I do." That admission opened a window into feelings many had yet to articulate. Instead of diminishing the conversation, it sparked a new dialogue, one where vulnerability and honesty became pathways towards understanding. The ripple effect of that single voice turned the tide, prompting others to share experiences of feeling sidelined and marginalized. Empathy began to bridge the gaps, and Max felt the shift. It was in those moments of acclimatization that he recognized they were not merely pushing against individual beliefs, they were guiding a systemic transformation, reminiscent of the journey his company had embarked upon. Months later, as the seasons transitioned from the chill of winter to the soft warmth of spring, Max stood outside the Wafa Trust branch, cradling a cup of coffee in his hands, taking a moment to reflect. Cherry blossoms danced in the breeze, and he watched as families and individuals streamed through the doors, customers who valued the change they had collectively enacted. That day marked the inaugural Wafa Community Fair, an event aimed at celebrating their progress, showcasing local talent, and deepening community ties. Vendors lined the streets just outside the branch, laughter and music spilling into the air as families shared in the joy of a transforming atmosphere. Gathered in the heart of the fair was the Diversity and Belonging Task Force, beaming with pride as they listened to testimonials shared before the crowd, their own words reaffirming the values they had fought for, the stories of resilience and hope that had sprouted. In that moment, Max felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Their journey had not been easy, and discomfort had nudged its way through the collective progress. But together, they had navigated through the turbid waters of change, guiding Wafa Trust towards a brighter future rooted in empathy, understanding, and shared purpose. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting a golden hue across the branch, Max allowed the realization to wash over him. They had not merely altered the course of a bank, they had revitalized a community united by shared stories and a collective goal. With the gentle sounds of laughter washing over him, Max held firmly to the belief that the journey ahead would continue to be one of learning, growing, and evolving, a journey that would forge deeper connections and ensure every voice would be valued and heard. The chapter was closing, but the story of Wafa Trust had only just begun. And for Max, that was the true legacy he had always sought to create.